Recently, mathematicians have evolved what they call the notion of attractors, or strange attractors in some cases. And these are processes where a dynamic is not pushed by causal necessity from behind, but it's pulled by a point in the future. You could almost say, for example, if you release a ball bearing up near the rim of a bowl, that its attractor is the bottom of the bowl. And the ball bearing will roll down to the bottom, then halfway up the side, then up the side in shorter and shorter cycles until it finally comes to rest in the exact bottom of the bowl. Well, from the point of view of the new mathematics, the bottom of the bowl is a basin of attraction, and the ball bearing has fallen under its influence. So I have always doubted that evolutionary theory without purpose, without teleology, could produce as complex a world as we see around us in as short a time, 5 billion years, as the life of the Earth. It seemed more as though these processes were not just wandering across a flat genetic landscape. They were the process of biological evolution was actually being channeled between high walls. In other words, it could move. It had some motion this way, some this, but its forward direction was inevitable. And this is the idea of an attractor, that what the universe is doing is it is under the sway of what I call the transcendental object at the end of time. And that is this domain of hyperconnectivity, that it would be perfect novelty. And all nature aspires for this state of perfect novelty. You could almost say that nature abhors habit, and so it seeks the novel by producing various kinds of phenomena at every level in biology, chemistry, and society. And so there really is a purpose to the universe. Its purpose is this state of hypercomplexification in which all of its points become related to each other, become what mathematicians call cotangent. And it gives the universe the feeling of being imbued with a caring presence. It makes it appear as though nature is tending toward something, and that it changes our own ethical and moral position in the universe. Because, science tells us that we're the products of a cosmic accident. We're at the edge of an ordinary galaxy in an ordinary star system, and we're damn lucky to be here. And that's it. That's our place, a very existential notion of our place in the cosmos. But if you take this other point of view, that process is under the influence of an attractor, and that the value the attractor is maximizing is novelty, then suddenly, for the first time in 500 years, human beings are moved back to the center of the stage, because we are the most novel thing on this planet. We are everything biology is, plus technology, language, politics, philosophy, art, so forth and so on. So suddenly human beings become important, not mere cosmic witnesses to a meaningless cosmos, but the cutting edge of a cosmos that glories in order and is moving toward higher states of order. And at the present moment, we are the carriers. Once it was the volcanic processes that shaped this planet. Once it was the life of the early oceans. Once it was the great dinosaurs. But today, humanity represents the cutting edge of complexity and this process of moving toward complexification. So without invoking God or any sort of myth, you give meaning to human life. What is man's purpose? To advance and preserve novelty. This is an ethical position. It means you don't replace rainforests with pastures. You don't censor books. You don't lean on people who make gender choices different from yours. No, the purpose of being a human is to complexify reality even more, to hand on a more diverse, more complicated, more multifaceted universe to our children. And when this process of complexification reaches the omega point, it will fulfill, I believe, the expectations of all of these religions, but it will fulfill it in a mature, scientific, and universal way that these religions all lack, because they all reflect their parochial origins.
So I recently finished a book called Elucidating Christianity. It's at the editors right now. And I finished the book with the story of Platos Cave. And this story is an incredible story in what it implicates. It's actually quite a simple tale. And it is very simple. It basically is a number of prisoners are basically raised in a cave where they're held prisoner, where they're held captive, and they're tied to a wall, and they're forced to look at a wall in front of them that's quite large, and shadows are projected on this wall that are coming from a fire that they can't see, that's behind them, behind the wall they're tied to. And the wardens that run the place make noises and terrify these prisoners by creating shadows on the wall. And the only world these prisoners have ever known is that world. They've never seen the outside day. That's the only existence they've ever known, is being locked in that cave. And so they think shadows talk, and they've never really seen color. They've never seen sunlight. And so these people, in other words, have a very limited perspective of reality. So it's very easy to put fear into them because they're unaware. And so one day, one of the prisoners is taken towards this light, and the light is this distant tunnel that leads to the outdoors. And these people have been down in the tunnel for so long, their eyes have become used to the darkness. And so any light, especially sunlight, hurts their eyes, literally causes them pain. Just like if you were to go outside after being in a dark closet for an hour or two, and you go outside and just open your eyes really wide, it would really hurt to do that. So they experience that same thing. And they see this guy dragged up to this light. And he's taken out, and he's in a tremendous amount of pain as they're taking him out there, because he's not used to the light, and he finally sees the light, and he sees this other world, and he can't believe basically what he sees, because it's so incredibly beautiful. And so he's brought back and by the wardens, and he starts telling the prisoners that he's been with what he's seen, and they think he's mad, and he can't see anything because his eyes have now become used to the light outside, and so he's blind. And so these people think that he's gone blind. The people that are down in the cave think he's gone blind and think he's gone mad. And so they think wherever they took him, wherever that light leads, is madness. And so they scoff at him, and they basically tell him, "You're crazy. You can't see anything, and they've taken you somewhere, and you're mad. You're crazy. Something's wrong with you." And poignant moment of the theory that Plato is presenting is when he says, what would happen if those wardens went to take others and take them to the same place that they took that other guy? They wouldn't want to go. They would do anything but go there, because they know if they go where that guy went, they're going to end up blind and they're going to end up crazy. And so even though those wardens are wanting to take them to a space that would be congenial and lovely and would change their life, they say no. The people that are down there say no. Because their perspective of the world, and here's the point of the whole story, their perspective of the world is so small that a larger perspective they won't allow. They won't allow because they've grown complacent and used to the space they're in, and any other space brings them fear because it's not the space that they're in. And the whole point of the story is to say that when people get locked into a particular comfort zone of reality, and they find a space that they can navigate and they feel secure in, and that they've aligned to and they think is the truth and all this stuff, and someone comes along and says, hey, there's a totally different reality for you, most people will be like, no, I don't want anything to do with it. Because the atheist doesn't want a world that has a God. The Christian doesn't want a world that doesn't have a God. And the polarities of these two realities, of these two people, the atheist and the Christian, they both will fight any other reality because they've decided on one. They've decided on one particular way that typically is instructed into people. Most people start believing what they're going to believe at a very young age. 12, 13, 14, things start to solidify as you go through puberty and you enter into adulthood. And if the only reality you've ever known is the one that's been shown to you by your parents, by your instructor, by your pastor, by your counselor, by your friends, by whoever, the reality that you're in, if that's the only one you've ever known, you won't want any other reality. All other realities just bring more confusion and more decisions that you have to make. And when people make their baseline decisions for their life, when they decide just how they're going to see the world, man, to change that, you have to bring catastrophe into their life. That's the only way they're going to change. It's the only way anybody changes is through catastrophe, failure, loss, disaster. Because that's the only way your own reality, it becomes a disaster. And so for a moment, you see it as a disaster and you're willing to look at other realities because yours is a disaster. And so this initiates change. Folks, that is what is happening now. That is exactly what is happening now. And everyone has gotten used to the world of deception that we were all taught in. I was taught too. I was at one time completely deceived. I won't go into it, but I was completely deceived in a particular belief system, namely Christianity. I was completely deceived in that. And it wasn't until my entire world fell apart and failure after failure happened in my life, and everything was just totally destroyed and obliterated, and everything that I knew wasn't real anymore. It was only in that moment of crisis, trauma, that I was willing to relinquish the world that I had been raised in. And because I walked down that path and was willing to walk down that path, I gave myself access. I merited access to a different reality, a larger reality. And it's the same thing with the people in the prison. If you've been raised in a prison of a particular belief system, it doesn't matter what the belief system is, and you've been raised in that system, you've been staring at the same wall of shadows your entire life. That's what's happened. And so when the warden comes, when the red pill comes, when the person who has a bigger, larger reality access comes, it's terrifying, because you're leaving the space of comfort that you've always known and have been in. And so to walk into that other reality voluntarily, which is what is required to be able to see it, You see, to be able to do that, you can't be sure. You have to doubt. You have to be willing to doubt.
Hello again, everybody. This is James Bartley, and you're watching and listening to the Cosmic Switchboard Show, the members section. Our very special guest today is Pierre Sabak, and we're just getting started. We're going to delve into the holographic culture, which is his current latest book.
You have the monochord, a musical instrument. It had a single string, and the lowest note or the lowest vibration on the string is physical matter, and then the highest vibration is the spirit. And basically, musical notes are denotational of different dimensions, and so dimensions are vibrating notes, and so musical notes refer to different dimensions. And so music, therefore, is very important. When you actually look at the muses, they have control over the waveform reality. They have control over, essentially, they have control over the logos or the word, but they have control over physical reality through sound. Thereby, if you control sound, you control physical reality. And sound is important because, remember, in the beginning, there is the logos, the creation of the sound. It's the spirit. The spirit is the aeon, the interference pattern, which creates the photon or the particle. And so therefore, within the symbology of the soul as well, you're seeing the same representation. Pneuma is spirit, the spirit is spiritus, which is the breath, which can be represented as logos, which is the word, which is the sound, which is the first invocation. The first invocation then creates the light, which is the soul, which is the sun. So the soul is the light, which is then expressed physically as a particle. There's the photon. So the spirit is the waveform, the particle or the soul is the expression of the soul, the expression of the individual, which is particularized as a form. In Genesis 1 and 2, in the Bible, you have the creation of humanity and of the universe, which symbolically is the first creation, the creation of the anthropos before the destruction of the anthropos, which is in the second verse. And the second verse talks about the generations of heaven and earth. And the reason why they're talking about the generations of the heaven and earth is because they're talking about the second creation. The first chapter in Genesis is the first creation of the anthropos, which are the proto-races, which are essentially the human, the daemonic and the angelic races, and then the corruption of the anthropos relates then to the Titanomachy, the war in heaven, and the replanting of the Adamic humans upon the earth, which is the generations of the heaven and the earth, which is described in chapter 2. So this is known throughout occult history. It's been well embedded. It's found within Homer. It's found within all of the mythological traditions, but it is something which it's been concealed, and it's we don't have this knowledge. The elite and the Illuminati, they have this knowledge, but it has been hidden away. And this knowledge is coming out. And it's coming out. It can't be stopped. The genie is out of the bottle.
Remember how I said it takes catastrophe for a person to reconsider? It takes catastrophe. What do you think we're in right now? Massive catastrophe, because awareness is coming into the picture. And is discovering, or human is discovering, you could say, reality, another alternate reality, a bigger reality, a larger perspective, and that's coming in through the internet because it can't be stopped. You can't stop the self-complexifying aspect of nature. Nature self-organizes. What do you think you are? You're a nature creature. You're a nature creature and you self-organize. So what is happening? The human collective along with the planet are aligning. And this is bringing about catastrophe because human beings have always been aligned to social orders. The organized human beings in this world, the organized systems. Those are all under social orders. They're not under the natural order. And the natural order is coming in and is obliterating all the social orders. Christianity is a social order. Creationism is a social order. Evolutionism is a social order. Atheism is a social order. These are all social orders. They're belief system orders. You have to see these things in this benign, logical sense if you're ever going to master them. If you're ever going to master something, you move past it. Meaning you've taken the understanding it brings, integrated it into the larger perspective, and moved past it, moved forward from the limitations that one perspective offers. Because if I have both the atheistic and the Christian perspective and can look at these things without any attachment to either, I'm a wiser person because I'm not taken by any order. I'm following the self-navigating, self-organizing order within me, meaning my intellect, my ability, my understanding, my feeling sense and innateness can look at these things. And without being attached to them emotionally, I can objectively see them and can see where they're dysfunctional and see where they're functional. And from that assessment, become a wiser person. That's why it's so important to not get locked or tied into a social order. Because you will get emotionally involved, and when you get emotionally involved, you're going to become irrational. You have to initially allow your perspective to look and observe the world without getting your emotions all into it yet. Allow the emotions to flow, but don't allow them to determine. They are a part of the whole. So if you are taken emotionally by a social order, you're involved in it, you have to have it, you can't understand life without it, you're captured by it. It is your warden, it is your captor. And you are captivated by it because that's the only reality you're seeing, because you're in a Platos Cave situation. And so the only wall you see is creationism. The only wall you see is atheism. The only wall you see is Islam. The only wall you see is Hinduism. The only wall you see is Buddhism. Just go down the line. And if you get locked into any of these social orders, you become the prisoner.
And now we're living in the times of disclosure. And disclosure was referred to as the apocalypse, apocalyptin, which is to unveil. To unveil is to disclose. And so disclosure is the apocalypse. It's the unveiling. It's a fantastic time to be alive because it's a very exciting time to be alive. And I also think that what's happening is that, I mean, I read a study by Pulsinger, and he was talking about how that basically with the sun that the electromagnetic field is beginning to dip, and when that occurs, people become more telepathic. The analogy would be when you're in space, there's less electromagnetism. And so when the Russians did experiments with telepathy in space, people are more telepathic. So when the electromagnetic field of the sun goes down, we start aligning up telepathically. And this has happened before, but the difference is now is we have 6-7 billion people on the planet. We don't just have 300 million people on the planet. So when 6 billion minds start lining up, things like computers start springing out of nowhere, and they start springing up very quickly. And the things like secrets which have been kept for thousands of years, people like myself, right? And I remember I didn't study linguistics. I studied fine art. You know, I came from a tradition of painting. I wanted to be an artist. But I did study semiotics, which is really the discourse of Illuminatics, is the study of the signs of the Illuminati. So, but suddenly people like me are coming out with all of these ideas. And so this is all part of what I would describe as this human alignment of minds, which is manifested also through our technologies. And so the elite, they're desperate and they're afraid of losing this power, and this is why we're seeing that they're trying to centralize power, and they're trying to consolidate this power, and they're trying to digitalize the economy, and they're trying to use every single trick in the book to actually put the genie back in the bottle and to try and censor information on the internet. It's almost, with all the censorship of information, it's almost been like a modern burning of books, or the modern burning of books within Alexandria. They're controlling the realm of ideas, and the realm of ideas, when you break it down, is the spiritual realm. The Aborigines talked about it as the dream time. The dream time is the spiritual realm. And the spiritual realm links into the dream realm, and this is why in the ancient traditions, controlling dreams was always very integral, because if you can control your dream, then you have control within the spirit realm. And this is about gnosis, it's about knowledge, because when you die, it's like dreaming. You can go into a dream and you forget your life, you forget everything. It's almost like dying. And therefore, when you wake up, then you remember, oh yes, it was a dream. But it's the same with dying as well. You can get lost in the spirit realm and not realize that you're in the realm of ideas. because suddenly you're in the realm of the spiritual realm of the universal ideas. Now, when you look at people like, I think it was Kenneth Ring who did the study Mindscape, he did a study into near-death experience within blind people. These are people who have never seen. And a person who's never seen, they have no visual imagination. They do not dream using sight. They only dream through smell, taste, and hearing, but they have no conception of sight. People who have lost sight later in life, from about the age of 5, if you lose your eyesight, you will still continue to dream visually. Now, people who have never seen before, when they have had near-death experiences, they've suddenly been able to see for the first time. So we know near-death experiences are real, and therefore we know that when a person is having a near-death experience and they're blind and they've never seen, but they are having what you would describe as an hallucinogenic experience, this is because they are entering into the realm of ideas. This, in Platonic philosophy, is the realm of universal forms. This is the implicit realm. Physicists refers to this as the implicit realm. This is the realm of waveform reality. In Greek Gnosticism, this is the aeon, and the aeon is expressed as a concentric circle, which is essentially a type of interference pattern or a hologram. And when that is expressed physically, it becomes a particle. So the sound or the spirit suddenly becomes a particle, which is the particularization of the idea, which is the particularization of one's point of view or attention. And that one point of view or attention is you, it's me, it's the whale, it's the dolphin, it's the fish. But it's all one. But the universe created itself so it could experience itself as the observer. So the point of life is life. The point of the universe is to observe.
The whole idea of the Great Awakening is to free us from enslavement. How do we free us from enslavement? We ourselves align to our own natural order, because the natural order is the order of the planet, is the order of everyone. And you can't align to that order through the social orders you've been in. So the way that Christianity or atheism presents the natural order is inadequate, because it is only from those perspectives. The natural order is outside, is past, is beyond Christianity, atheism, Mormonism, Judaism, go down the list, Hinduism, Jadeism, on and on it goes. All of those fit within the natural order, which doesn't have a circumference, which doesn't have an end. It is eternal.
So much in our holographic world is been tainted, has been corrupted, and has been distorted. You spoke in the first segment about interference patterns and wave patterns and whatnot, and the interference pattern is such nowadays that, like, truth is so distorted now, Pierre, that people don't even know which way is up for all intents and purposes. So yeah, I'd just like you to comment on that, but also complete that thought you were about to make.
No, I'll answer your question. I think with the again, this is all going back to an ancient tradition, and this is going back to the disciple. The word disciple is related to deceive. So the disciperati, the deceivers, is a cognate of a disciple, because the disciple is deceived. And when you look at levels of knowledge, the disciple, first of all, is introduced to, shall we say, it can be the religious tradition or the mythological tradition, it doesn't really matter, but they are given a literal interpretation. And so they receive, and many don't go any further than the literal interpretation. But the next level of the priesthood then is, okay, this is not really a literal interpretation. This is an allegory. This is allogoria. This is other speaking. It's a parable. And so then you would then move into subjects such as astrotheology. So the miracles of Christ are really astrotheological, for example. And then what they do is they turn everything upside down. So once you understand the science behind, and this is science, and it's based upon linguistic encryption, which is etymology, alphanumerical encryption, gematria, sacred geometry. Once the initiant then understands those disciplines and how those disciplines are interconnected, everything then gets turned on its head again. And they said, oh, you know how we said that the literal interpretation isn't true? Well, actually, it is true. The deities do exist. Here's the deity, speak to one. And that is how it works. It works primarily through deception, and knowledge has been hidden or concealed through deception. It's been concealed through this ideoglossolalia, this private discourse. It's this codified discourse. And so even today, when you listen to the politicians, they're often using codified discourse of the secret societies. So it's a highly elliptical, highly veiled language, and it's something that we need to be very mindful of when we're looking at occult symbolism, whether it's ancient mythological occult symbolism, or if we look at the occult symbolism of the ship of state. Ship of state is really referring to the angelic host. The angelic host instituted governments, statute a law. Stratos is an army, which is the Greek word for the host. The host in the Latin means an invading host, but it's a translation of the Hebrew word Sabaoth, angelic host. Saba, an army. Sevet, a crew of a vessel. Teva, which is an ark. These are flying arks, flying vessels, which are identified with the archon and an ark in the Greek olkos, which is a large carrier vessel. So our whole system is based on worshipping Malach an angel or Malach a sailor. We are venerating these angelic beings who are sailors. And therefore, within the Gnostic tradition, they had a problem with the Elohim, because they said, hold on, we're not discounting God, but what we're saying is that the Elohim, the high ones, are not the one and the same thing with God, because they are equated with panspermia and the planting or replanting of the human race upon the planet Earth. Whereas this was the second creation, but they're not equated with the first creation, because the first creation was the aeon, was the expression of the aeon, of the spirit, which materialized the anthropos, which were the original races. And the original races then became corrupted through genetic engineering, and that was the corruption of the anthropos, which was the fall of humanity, the fall of Eve, the fall of woman, and the planting of humanity upon the earth, which is equated with the serpent within the biblical, the apocryphal, the heretical, and every other tradition.
If you're going to live in reality that's conducive to the awakening that's occurring, that what we're experiencing, if you're going to remain relevant, you have to open that perspective. You have to open your perspective. And I'm not saying that because you have to believe something. I'm saying you have to disbelieve everything. And that is the nightmare of the Great Awakening, because all the Westerners know they're right. I knew I was right. I was a 40-year Christian. I knew I was right. I knew I was right as much as the professor, the atheist professor working at the local university. They know they're right. They absolutely know they're right. And every single person is in a Platos Cave situation, which is why I ended my book with that. Because it applies to everyone, not just Christianity. It applies to all religions, all beliefs, everything. Because everything we have been taught has been a lie. And I used to think, no, most things, but not everything. No. No, dude. Everything has been a lie. Everything. And that's what you're going to find out as you get further and further and deeper into the Great Awakening. And you're going to have to be willing to relinquish all the things you quote unquote know. Because everything you know has been what you've been told or shown by people who are already or are a part of the system. And how do you get out of a system? Trauma, horrendous life crisis, catastrophe. And so that's what we're experiencing right now. And since the only way is through, we all have to walk into that space openly, willingly, and benignly, like completely able to objectively look at everything and say, okay, as an adult, I'm going to assess these things and I'm going to make a wise decision without getting irrational, without getting caught up in some type of order. See what I'm saying?
When we look at the revealing, the apocalypse, if you will, now, because of the speedy means of information retrieval, which you alluded to, we now know what these gods or these demigods or these hybridized plantation managers are all about. They're all about guzzling adrenochrome and killing children and human trafficking on a planetary scale. So we're getting an idea of what exactly are the dynamics behind all this. And your work is a key critical component of gaining greater understanding. So I really want to thank you personally for all the time and effort you put into putting this work out. And I'm looking forward to more of your work in the future.
I just want to express also, because you talked about this idea of killing, and I think it is something which is obviously very sinister, and a lot of people find it very distasteful. But when you look at the occult tradition, etymologically, there's the word associations between sacred, secret, and secrete. So the secret is related to secretion. And again, it's polyglottal. It's also found in the Chinese. The Chinese word mi, meaning secret, is also polymorphic. It also means to secrete. And so they are equated with the secretion. And the reason why they do this, physically, they seem to be harnessing ingredients in order to extend their life. And this is why they are doing this. So looking at words and etymology is a way into understanding this further. And I think also, the more I talk about this, more people will go back and research this for themselves, and they will bring new understandings and new nuances and levels of understanding. So I think we're only at the beginning of something which is very exciting, and which as the means of actually breaking this all open. All the warfare on all the planets was all based upon the same thing, and this was, do men represent themselves, or do we have these arbitrators who represent mankind? And these arbitrators are born of a boat, and they represent the interests of the Elohim. And so this, I call it the Platonic Elohist split, was this division within the priesthood. It was essentially the division between the republic, between men actually representing themselves, publicus, meaning an adult or a human, the general public representing themselves, or do we have a monarchical system in which the descendants and the grafted bloodlines represented humanity? And I think, whichever system we use, we cannot have a system which has integrity or legitimacy if humanity is not aware of what's going on within politics. Now, fine, if humanity is happy to be ruled and controlled by this grafted lineage, so be it. But we need to shed light on this so that we can represent ourselves and that humanity can represent themselves. They believe that they are descended from angels, and they believe they have a God-given right to rule, and yet we have no idea about this. And therefore, this is what needs to change. And once this changes, and once people who go into politics begin to understand, yes, this is a system based on an adversarial system, as we said, Satan, an adversary, Chiltern, a government. It's based upon this upper and lower house, which encodes this angelic lineage, Malak an angel, Malak a sailor, Melech a king. Then we can begin to have greater democracy. Demos, which are the people. The people can then be represented, and we can hopefully have a fairer world in which there is no, class is a naval fleet, in which the class system itself is not based upon whether one is born of a boat, but is representational of humanity. What is great about us, because there is so much goodness, and I believe this so strongly, there is so much good, and we have the right to thrive. We have the right we deserve this, and we deserve to express ourselves and to contribute to the universe. There's been so much knowledge lost in the past through warfare, through religious intolerance, through misunderstanding, through ignorance. We really deserve better. The human race deserves better. And now is such a special time where we can begin to wake up, we can begin to deconstruct the lies, the deception, and we can begin to understand what is really happening in the world.